So, where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Detroit, Michigan, 1925. I came up through the end of the big crash and went into the Great Depression. And President Roosevelt was our president, and thank the Lord he got in when we had that, because he settled it. He got us out of it. Nobody had anything. Gas was 10 cents a gallon for your car. My mother used to put 50 cents in, and we'd ride around a little bit. When us kids, we'd chip in some money. We'd have an old car, and we'd chip in dimes, nickels, whatever we had. We'd pull up in front of a pump, and they pumped your gas for you, and they wiped your windshield and everything. You got everything for that dime.
Oh, wow.
And we'd pull up and say, he said, "How much gas do you need there, young fellas?" I said, "Put 50 cents in." He'd look at us. "Yeah, that's 50 cents. That's 5 gallons. 5 gallons of gas. We could last all day on that." So, it was hard, but things were cheap.
How old were you when the Great Depression hit?
The Great Depression? Well, I think it ended in 1931.
So you would have been...
I think it ended around 1931.
6 years old?
So I was born in 25, so I was just a little tot going through that, I can remember a Christmas. I wanted a trike. There were 2 boys and 2 girls. Not that early, but we total were 2 boys and 2 girls. I had a brother that was 18 months younger than me. And we had to share an old used trike that my mother got out of a trade shop.
Really?
She brought it home to us, yeah. And we would fight over that bike every time. My mother took it away and hit it on us, and that stopped the fighting. But we lived in a cottage. My grandma and grandpa lived on a farm, and they were on commodities. We were all on commodities, welfare, or whatever you want to call it. And that kept them going on the farm. And, it was hard to sell because nobody had any money. The money just wasn't there. And so we lived in the cottage all year round. And, cottages back then on a lake were made of panel, wallpaper, no insulation. And in the wintertime, and, it used to get down in the zeros, And we had a pot-bellied stove, a big one. And we would get that going with wood. We went out and got wood. And we put that going with wood. When it got hot enough, we'd put the coal in there. We got coal in there. And then that would burn all day. And my job was to make sure that fire didn't go out all night. If it went out, I had a price to pay from my dad.
What was that?
He'd give us a good beating.
Yeah?
Yeah. He didn't mix words with it. He was a mean father.
He was.
I never had a good father, a wonderful mother. My father was a heavy drinker. I don't know. He never had a trade, but he did have a trade. He was a roofer. And roofers drank. Masons and carpet, they all drank. And I don't know why, whether it was the material they were using, the nails or whatever it was. But they'd always leave the job and go into a bar and drink and then not finish the day. When I was a little boy, I went with my dad. He carried shingles up a ladder. Can you imagine? The cedars, they'd drop over your shoulder. I'd carry about 2 or 3 of them. And he would take practically a bundle up there. Well, so we all had to pitch in and work. And we lived on fish. We lived on wild game, rabbits, pheasant, quail. We hunted all the time, all year round. And the game warden never said a thing because he knew we were on, the Depression was on. Nobody had any money. They wouldn't be able to pay a fine if they were fined. So, but those were good years because we stood together, we loved one another, and we fought together. We just kept things going. Well, the Depression lifted. And we moved in Detroit. My dad started getting some roofing contracts. The sad problem is that he just spent money, and it didn't come to the family. So we still struggle quite a bit. You know, the Depression boys never had good clothes. And that's why we never went to church, because we were ashamed to go into a church.
Oh, man.
And that has a little bearing on my life when I hit the beach at Iwo Jima, which I'll mention. Well, we went to school. I wasn't a good student. I didn't particularly like school. And, it's strange. I hated math. I hated math. And if you don't do math, you don't do well at all, because you've got to have math. And I just didn't like doing it. I had a tough time, so they held me back a grade. And then when I got in junior high school, that was a bummer. And when I got in the 8th grade, I was about 16 years old. And I remember the three of my two buddies, we grew up together in the neighborhood, and we had an old car that was sat in front of the house in Detroit. And we rigged a radio up. It was an old radio. We rigged it up, and we would listen to the big bands. And
What were the big bands back
the
then?
big band numbers. Oh, Tommy Dorsey, Jimmy Dorsey, the brothers, two Irishmen fought all the time. And we had, Duke Ellington. He had a black band, great music, good music. And there were so many. Then Bing Crosby, the crooner, he always was on a particular radio show. We'd listen to him. And my grandma bought his recordings on an old Victrola, which you cranked. And as a kid, I spent time playing Bing Crosby, and I'd go sit down, and Bing would be singing. He'd like to, over the river. There was no power left. I had to go and crank it up again. That's what we had to do, to listen to a recording. Kate Smith. The big lady, 200 pounds, great American woman. During the war, she introduced God Bless America. Irving Berlin wrote it for her, and she introduced it, and it just went wildfire. Today, nobody sings it unless I have them sing with me. They don't sing it. They don't know it. High school students do not know that song. And
That's
it's a
a
great
shame.
song. It's another patriotic song. So my brother and I, we struggled through. I sold newspapers, Saturday Evening Post for a nickel. I got 2 cents. A newspaper was 3 cents. I got half a cent. I got a cent for every 2 papers I sold. I mean, that's what we did. But you could buy stuff for what you had. You could always buy something. You got something for your money, And and when we got to be teens, we would go out to the lake and swim. We had a gang of us that get together in an old car, and we'd go out to the lake, my grandma's cottage. She'd let us use the cottage, and we had a beautiful 90-foot drop-off, sand beach, sand waiting, then you drop down. It was a crystal clear, loaded with pike, loaded with bass, loaded with walleye pike, and perch and crappies. We lived on that stuff. Today, I love fish.
You do?
I love fish. I do. I love seafood. Yeah. Well, anyway, we were healthy kids. It's strange, isn't it? We didn't have a lot of stuff kids have today, but we were healthier. We went through a lot. We had all the diseases, even before they had all the shots. And it was strange, we used to walk home from school, and we'd notice a black Ford coupe. Well, when you saw a black Ford coupe, that was a nurse. And if it was in front of your house, she was in there waiting to give us shots.
Oh, okay.
Oh, man, we want to skip and get out of there. But we know we had to go in there. So in we go. And she's, here they are. So my brother would come in. I had 2 sisters, all of us. Roll your sleeve up. I don't want that shot. Oh, my God. We in those days, we were afraid of all that stuff. Well, they gave us shots. And then she left, and, well, it wasn't too bad. Yeah, our arms were sore. But we went through all of that. We didn't have any particular thing to keep the pain away. But we were healthy kids. We didn't see the doctor a lot. We did have trouble with our teeth. And my mother, she was a great cook and a great baker. She had a bakery during the Depression. I can remember in Detroit, on the west side, we needed a place to live, so there was a store, and in the back there was everything you needed. It was everything to live with, but in the front it was sort of like you could put they had a couple of counters in there so you could put a bakery in, and we put a big shade, a drape across that. We lived behind that. That's how we lived. And she would sell bakery and sell cakes. The only problem is my dad would tap the till. He'd open the till up and take money and go out. He'd be drinking.
Oh, man.
He just irresponsible. And us boys, we worked. When I was 10 years old, I will never forget it. My two buddies were coming down the sidewalk, and one of their dads worked for the Detroit City Railway. He always had a job. Always. Streetcars, buses, always had a job. So he always had money in his pocket. And he shared. We all shared. And so they came by and they said, "Hey, Don, you want to go to the movie with us Saturday?" And I said, "I haven't got any money." He said, "All you need is a dime. Get in." I said, "I'd have a dime. Wait a minute, maybe I'll ask my mom." Things were a little bit better then. I walked in, I'll never forget. "Ma, can I have a dime?" She said, "What do you want a dime for?" "I want to go see a movie. Ken Maynard, favorite cowboy, is going to be on." She said, "You want a dime?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." "Go earn it. I don't have it. I don't know what we're going to have for supper, but we'll have something." She always managed to have something. And she said that to me. And I went out, and my two buddies says, "I will each give you a nickel. Let's go." And I never forgot what she said. So I went to work. After school, I did everything I could. I shoveled snow in front of stores. I'd ask them if I could clean them. They'd give me 35, 40 cents like that, maybe 50 cents, 25. And I always had money in my pocket. And you always have friends when you have money in your pocket. All your buddies come around.
You learned that at a young age, huh,
Oh,
Don?
yeah. So I became quite independent like that. I've worked since I was 10 years old. And I'm paying a little bit for it right now. But the ministry, that was mental stress, But the other work I did, it was decorating. I climbed ladders, hung wallpaper, refinished wood, antique furniture. I did it all in the line of decorating or refurbishing. And that was hard work. And now my legs are paying for it. I believe that's what it is.
Really?
Yeah, because I never injured my legs. Yeah, but they say you'll still pay a price. I remember coming home from the war. I sat in the front room. My dad was reading a paper, and I says, "Dad, I'm really lucky." He said, "Why?" I said, "I went through 4 years of war, and I came home. There's not a thing wrong with me." He said, "Give it a little time yet." He was in the First World War. He said, "When you get older, you're going to find out you're going to pay."